Well, welcome to another episode of Rimshots with Sean, brought to you by Barstools and Bandtalk. And this is a lady who I met. I think we have mutual friends, and she had a post that I found it was really interesting. So I reached out to her. So Stells Di Rossi Hurst, how are you, ma'am?
I'm great. How are
And
you?
I'm super. And you're residing where again? Because I know when we
I'm
talked,
in
you were. Go ahead.
Berkeley, California, also
Right.
known as Berkeley, where all the radicals are from.
Right, that wonderful, obviously. So anybody that is a music buff would know there was the festivals that were out there, the
Mhm.
university, those types of things. So that's exciting. What's Berkeley like these days? I've never been.
Berkeley has changed a lot since the 90s when I was a kid. It's changed physically, but it's a lot more diverse than I remember, which is beautiful. It
Yeah,
has always been a metropolis for free thinkers, creatives, geniuses. You've got teachers with blue hair on campus that are like 80. It's awesome.
yeah. And I mean, I would think that the vibe, a creative vibe like that would really lend itself to, pretty a healthy, active lifestyle, and just not a lot of stress. I guess is that a fair statement, or maybe not?
It can be and it can't be. It just depends on what's going on. It's a city like any other, but I
Right.
don't know of anybody that is upset 15 minutes from the redwoods and 15 minutes from the beach. You can just go into nature and check yourself at any time. It's awesome.
Best of both worlds, right?
Mhm.
And that I guess is considered Northern California, correct?
It's considered the Bay Area with the East Bay and San Francisco. So it is northern, but not quite NorCal. So it's got its own little kind of metropolis and hub mindset.
I have a cousin that lives out there, and she is in, I want to say Tecate. She is an animal rescue farm out there, and does quite well with it. So, yeah, I've never been. I have to visit her sometime. So, but enough about me. So let's talk about you. So, you and I had talked a month or so ago, maybe a little longer than that, just kind of about your career and some of the things that you were doing. And so for starters, you said you have two acts. So talk about those two acts, and then we'll delve into this.
The main one that I'm known for that I've had close to 30 years is Method to the Madness. It was kind of a brainchild that happened in the 90s. I had kind of grown up and nobody looked like me or represented what I looked like in rock or grunge rock at the time until I came across a band called Skunkanasi from the UK. And there was a song called Selling Jesus, and I heard it and I was like, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen. She's the same complexion as me. Oh my God, I want to do that. So I started
Yeah.
hanging out at the 924 Gilman with my friend Heidi back in the day, and we went to Geek Prom and stuff. And I got into the punk scene and the rock scene, and I traded the violin for the guitar and never looked back. The other
And
project, oh,
yes.
go ahead, go
No, I
ahead,
was
go ahead.
gonna say no. Go with the other project.
The other project, The Velvet Crush, came years later, but Madness took me on quite an interesting musical journey. It started in Oakland, California, right by Lake Merritt, and led me to go 10 years in South America, Guatemala, of all places. So
Wow.
we've always considered Guatemala the birthplace of Method to the Madness. It's where the first lineup of Madness kind of came together in a little town called Panajachel. And I met these guys named Ugo and Josh. And we just kind of put it together and let the angst come out. We hooked up with Lake Atitlan International Music Festival with Roberto Luce. And I started basically being an East Bay punk out of the country. And it took me to other countries until I came back to the United States. I got to go to France, I got to go to England. And then I ended up getting in Arizona, of all places, where the real fight began. And that's kind of where I began to kind of meet musical apartheid of all things, which was just awkward after playing internationally. I mean, like the racism existed, but I had never ever seen it get that bad until the Southwest.
Um, I'm always very mindful when I talk to people from the U.S. to totally avoid politics, and the simple reason is that you just never know what's going to come back at you if you express anything anyway, right? Canada,
Right.
we're kind of like that, but we're not so. The division, if there is any, it's more a party, not a person, and and whatever.
Mhm.
So I don't want to go there. But for somebody that, as you said, you didn't see people that looked like you. Um,
No.
so what would have been some of the things that you would have experienced when you were trying to play and play music down there?
It was kind of like a Suntown town vibe. I was in Tucson, and one of the first things I noticed about the music scene there is that it was mostly cover bands.
Right.
It was mostly men. They were mostly Caucasian. There were, and the reason why I use apartheid is because it literally was like back in the sundown era where there was black music and white music. You had a heavy Latino population, a heavy Caucasian population, and a very small African American population. And at that time, Arizona only made up 4% of the entire state for people that were African American. And what I reached out there as far as an experience was I come from a multicultural family. My father's Sicilian, my mother's Egyptian. I'm first gen American. So they did not culturally ascertain or understand how I could be Egyptian, Italian, and Black. And that happened my whole life. But in the music industry, I was met with a lot of racial slurs, intolerance. We were at a Juneteenth concert where the show was actually unplugged, and the guy came backstage and did slurs. And this is last June, mind you. And this is when
Wow.
I decided to just come back to California because I realized I lived in a community that did not care to support me, did not know what I was, did not understand that I had the right to creatively be myself, and that art has no pigment. Just because I look a complexion doesn't mean I should have a specific sound. It was
Right.
one of the most dehumanizing feelings as an artist that I noticed that my male peers that were Caucasian never faced, ever. But it was said to me. And as a woman, it's already a boys' club. I mean, there are some gentlemen out there. I will speak up for them. One
Right.
of them, two of them, I want to say hi to them real quick. They're in a blues band called Black Cat Bones, Jeff Daniels and Bill Greenberg. And I mentioned them because Jeff was cool enough to lend me his drummer. People did not want to work with me. So Bill moonlighted as a blues musician and then this rocker misfit with me. And I used to make jokes saying that I was the mistress band. So there were some good folks down there, and those are great guys. But there were a lot of other men that came up to me that had the audacity to just say, like the guy who came and unplugged the show, he was saying, "Oh, that first band was so horrible playing that Nirvana style music. Why don't you play some Al Green?" And I'm going, "What did you say the first time you heard Eminem?" It just kind of crossed my mind of, is this the kind of mindset that the whole town was in? And I was spat on. I had beer bottles thrown at me. I had my band ostracized. I was denied gigs, denied pay, um, often asked to be a token to help bring crowds to other shows, but not paid. And this is the same thing that my grandfather experienced when he was touring in the Motown era with the Sundown era stuff. So that's why I called it a sundown mentality musically, because to play internationally and just see musical brothers and sisters be creative and then hit this region of the Southwest where I was told that I should only sing Aretha Franklin and I couldn't cover, Smashing Pumpkins or Marilyn Manson, or be okay. It was okay for the men to do it,
Right.
but not me. And there was a event that they came up with called Black Renaissance, that they tried to do, and I attended because I was the only Black female rocker there. Everybody else was doing the typical music, which there's nothing wrong with it. It's great music. Music is good when it's good music. But I did notice after I performed, and I had brought an interracial band where I believed that art was art, it had no pigment. Little girls that were African American and their mothers were coming up to me, thanking me, saying, "You don't know what that meant to that little girl." And oh, yes, I did. I just
Right.
didn't get to meet the woman on stage that represented me. So it's a big thing that's kind of taboo still.
Yeah, no, and I agree. I mean, and you threw the people, but also being a woman, because I know I had a conversation with um, actually a very famous rock musician who we covered that. She was basically talking about A, she's a woman. B, she's not 20 anymore, and all the things that get thrown at her. Um,
Yep.
and my line was, well, but you still sound amazing. You still look amazing. You got a great personality. Who gives a crap about age? But unfortunately, that's what it. I'm going to call it the American Idol thing, where it's like now everybody's got to fit in this little box, and if you're not in that box, hey, thanks for coming out. Go sit in the stands and vote. We don't want you on stage.
That's kind of what happened. They did give me a lot of things to judge other people in competitions. And what I noticed was that everybody was just falling into these compartmentalized categories. And that's kind of why I went into creative activism, to tear down those walls.
Mhm.
I just kind of felt like, in a way, the same thing that Josephine Baker went through in the 20s was still happening where I was living. And I had to get out and do interviews. And the more interviews I did, the more my family got harassed. Bandmates began to try to make me more palatable, as they felt. I fired them. I just,
Why not?
I,
You're the boss.
well, it wasn't about a boss thing. It's just kind of a business decision that if you don't believe in what we're doing, you don't belong here. It
Yeah.
just, you don't want to have people working with you that don't believe in you or your message, or that want to censor you creatively. That's not a band, that's control. And it got bad. The clothes that I wore, the way that I represented myself, they began to water down my sound. They told me I was too angry. They told me that I was too political. And I'm sitting here saying, all I'm saying is let me be myself, and writing from my personal experience of what I face and the issues that face me. And you think that I'm being political for just asking for civility? That's insane. So, of course, being the rebel that I am in punk rock, I went on more magazines and told my story more places, and went outside of their reach when they didn't want to book me. It landed me into competitions. I got to do, during 2020, virtual tours all around the world, to places like Germany. I played in Tokyo. I played in all these other places while everyone was shut down. I was making sure I could cast my net of my sound. And I found that the world was more welcoming to me than the area that I was in. I got to meet the founder of the Museum of Punk when I played Mesa Music Festival with Everclear headlining. And he told me, girl, you got to get out of here. You're in a dead zone. They're never going to understand you here. And that was part of another reason for my move. Another thing that I got to do was I won an international contest of a song, and I had written and I'd entered it, and I got placed by judges' pick to be on the Rising Star stage of Life is Beautiful and play with Arctic Monkeys and all these big 75 band shows. My town didn't even put it in the paper. We have emails where the press ignored it. They completely just did the rope-a-dope. People denied that it was real when we tried to fundraise locally. So I went, I played, I met who I needed to meet, and everybody that didn't believe me, I got rid of them.
I can believe what you're saying, because my son, who here he is, white middle class kid, doing hip hop and producing it well, and he actually got involved with some people that were running one of Jay-Z's labels, and
Mhm.
their exact line was, "You got to make it elsewhere before you make it in your backyard," which is really quite sad.
Exactly.
But I experience that all the time. I want to give you a little bit of an American Canadian connection here, because there was a lady up here by the name of Viola Desmond, and you go look that up. She was a businesswoman, so she owned her own hairdressing salon.
Mhm.
She went to a place called New Glasgow, Nova Scotia, and she went to a movie theater called the Roseland Theater, which I've actually played before. She sat in a whites only section and was arrested, and
Wow.
basically wouldn't leave. And she became not only a cult hero, but a hero for the cause. And it took until 2010 for her to be pardoned, some 40 some odd years after she died. And they basically repaid the fine that she had to pay, which at the time was $20, and it wound up being $368, which is now a scholarship in her name. but is given out every year. So there you go. We in Canada are not immune to some of the nonsense that takes place. So you moved. The move's been good for you.
Yes.
I know you're doing all the activism, which is great. I got to know you a little bit, so you speak your mind. That's also great because there's nothing wrong with that. Few people do, unfortunately. And you do it. You know what? I'm going to say you do it in such a way that a lot of people leave in comment sections in social media, and then they won't say it when they're sitting across the table.
Mhm.
And you're not like that, so that's awesome. So just tell me about this. Like I'll call it a revitalization now that you're in Berkeley. The musical spirit, I guess, is just amazing.
One of the things that I'm working on, sorry, is that I'm trying to go back to my roots. In Berkeley, I hung around the 924 Gilman as a kid. It was a magical time and place. This is when bands like Green Day had just stopped calling themselves Sweet Children. I grew up listening to Live 105. I got to see a lot of the bands like Rancid when they first started doing the Warp tours. And this is the heart and soul of what Madness kind of was that mid 90s era. So being back in the scene and seeing the way the punks are now and what's going on and getting reconnected and checking out the local venues while I'm attending school, I'm going to Full Sail University and getting a degree in audio engineering. So right now I'm
Yeah.
kind of in the listening phase of things while I'm also recording. So I've been to a couple of different places in San Francisco, Alameda, Berkeley, and Oakland club wise, just getting to know my creative peers, networking, seeing what they're all about. It is a very interesting scene. It has a revival in the sense of where there's still a DJ scene. DJs are never going away. There is a lot of experimentation with these DJs that I did not notice before, which is kind of interesting because I have the two projects. One of them's grunge rock, the other's alternative rock, which is leading me more towards an old school Nine Inch Nails kind of sound earlier, where
Yeah.
they mix that industrial with the grunge. So I'm thinking this album is going to kind of goth out a little bit. And I've been writing it for about 2 years, but moving back to a place where it's a little more tolerant has changed the tone of the album completely. So I kind of want to revisit it, take some of the songs people heard performed live and kind of go back at it, change some things, change the feel, and just refine it.
That's very cool. And of
Yeah.
course, the Bay Area, well known for that whole thrash metal scene with the Big Four, which are still mostly going strong. So that's amazing. If you can believe it, we're almost at 20 minutes. So we want to keep this at a level where, because I said it, man, people zone out, right? And like you get the stats on things, and it's like, man, if you can get people to zoom in for 10 to 12 minutes, you're doing really well, right? Um,
Yep.
so I know how I found you. Viewers that want to find out more about your story, what you're up to, your band, everything you're doing, where do they find you?
You can pretty much Google me. I'm on every platform out there. I'm on iTunes, Amazon. My hashtag is at get a little loco. So madness is only a little bit crazy. You can find us on YouTube. We are rebranding everything since I've relocated. So we have a new EP that's going to be coming out this fall with my solo work called Misunderstood. With 3 tracks, one called Kicking and Screaming, which you can follow on our socials, Instagram and Twitter at Get a Little Loco, as well as Facebook. Or you could just type in Stells Di Rossi Hurst. It's such an odd name. Google will pop me up like crazy.
Absolutely. Well, Stells Di Rossi, I love the handle Stells Di Rossi Hurst. After I got you to spell it before we started there, it's like I'll remember it forever. I want to thank you for doing this because I mean, we people do need to understand, right? Like music is great, but it's not all rainbows and butterflies, right? I mean, there's some
Mm-mm.
things that take place, and good on you for not just throwing it in and at the towel and saying I'm done. And I wish you a lot of success. And let's stay in touch because, like I say, you're doing some interesting things. So I want to thank you, girl, so much.
Thank you.
Peace out. We'll be back after this.